I had printed something out and forgot to bring it with me, so I'm just going to have to wing it instead of reading what I had written. But there's some key things to point out about the parable of the Good Samaritan today that maybe don't jump out at you right away. First, I want to point out the very title, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Hopefully, if I have caught myself enough, and the rest of the sermon today, you won't hear me use the word good again in front of Samaritan. See, one thing that's unique to our Holy Scripture that did not exist when it was first written is these little titles above parables and stories. They were not written in there originally. It's just the way Bible editors have added things along the way. It's funny to me to see the word the Good Samaritan in front of it as if all the others must have been bad somehow. But I can relate to it because I believe there are parts of our society today that might tell a story about that one good Muslim they had met, or their one black friend they have, the good one they have at work, or something like that. And so I imagine that probably this was written in there with an understanding that at the time Samaritans and Jews did not necessarily get along, which is true. But it also it reflects that the rest of them were bad, which is not true at all. Samaritans, after all, were people created by the same God as the Jews were. So you won't hear me say the Good Samaritan too much the rest of the day. I hope not. I hope I'm kind of getting rid of that. And you'll just hear me talk about the Samaritan. Because I don't want to imply that there was just only that one good one that came along the way. And that's why this story stands out so well. But notice, not only do these people, as they walk by him, ignore him and not help him, but they kind of go a little bit out of the way, maybe so as not to be seen. Something I've seen even recently with issues in our community, whether it be the 4 or 5 homeless people that I know in Pine Grove and I see others avoid, or the issues or devastation in some people's homes from the flooding. You might not realize it, but Pine Grove does have homeless people. Not a lot, but we have them. I myself have caught myself in the past going, well, do I talk to them, do I not? What's their situation? The other day I just drove by a gentleman sitting in front of the VFW who I knew from certain signs was clearly a homeless person. He was not a hiker on the Appalachian Trail. I had time that day to stop and talk with him and maybe meet a need, and I didn't do it because I thought of something else I could do. I feel like I was wrong and I fell short on that. I'm not telling you you should feel the same way, but I feel kind of like the priest in the story who went to the other side of the road. I found something else for myself to do that day. And I hope that if I run into this gentleman again or pass by him driving on the street, I might stop a little bit and talk to him. At least just to talk to him. He didn't appear to have any immediate needs, but maybe some company would have been good for him. But even I, the priest in this story, went to the other side of the road in that. The Levite, who probably was a person of some financial wealth and able to take care of this person, left them there as well. But here's what's cool about this Samaritan. And again, in the story, it never says the words, the Good Samaritan. Jesus didn't say the Good Samaritan. Others added that later. He just said the Samaritan. The Samaritan not only stopped and took care of him, used his wine, which would not have been a cheap thing to acquire at the time, to clean his wounds, took him, loaded him on his animal so he would have to walk, and took him to the innkeeper, and then paid for him to stay at the innkeeper. He didn't call up Barry Spatz like I do to get help from another fund to help the person. He used his own money. Barry Spatz, by the way, is another minister in town who runs our transient ministry. It's a good ministry. But there are times where I've been asked right here in front of the church, and I'm really sharing some of my weaknesses here from people for money, and I give them a phone number to call instead. I've done that, and again, this is all part of my own journey. And I tell them, well, we contribute to that fund, so call them and they'll help you. Not a bad thing, but not what the Samaritan did. The Samaritan took their own money, and not only that, said if the bill gets higher, I'll pay you for it when I come back to check on him. He came back through even, and I realized that this story was such a big part of my childhood here growing up in this church, and even in my adult faith journey, And I realized too that all the times I read this story, it only reinforced it, which is why reading is so very important to our children. Surely Waddy Piper, who wrote this book, had to have heard the story of the Good Samaritan. It's almost identical in all its ways. The Levite and the priest, just like the other engines, had the ability to help, and they didn't. They found a reason not to. We will all make that choice in our life. This is not a judgment of those engines that choose not to help, but it is kind of an observation that we have the ability to help. And maybe we'll do that more in the future. And it's also a celebration of those little engines as they grow to realize what they can really do, just as I think our church is doing now. Just as is happening to me unexpectedly in my ministry. I've ended up in positions in the past few weeks that I did not see coming. On Friday morning, I opened up an email and found out that I had been appointed to a county-wide committee on disaster recovery I didn't know even existed. All because I missed a conference call on Thursday and couldn't say no to it. So this is what happens. It's okay, it's just a few conference calls. But there is a group called VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster Recovery. And if you look at the members of that group in our county, you'll see one or two people in a paid position at the county level to do that. The rest are all volunteers. Pastors of churches, people who are involved in ambulance associations. And it's such a vital thing in an incident like this, or what has occurred in Tremont, because that incident, as devastating as it is for a few dozen people, will not rise to the financial devastation that triggers help from the government, which is often much needed. So assistance won't be there from FEMA and other organizations. But still, a few dozen people are left in some really tough spots. And it's in moments like this that volunteer organizations, including churches, will step up not only with manpower, but also with financial resources to help. We'll be the little engine that can when the big engine can't or won't or isn't able to for whatever reason. And I'm not judging that at all. You'll see in our bulletin today the fundraiser for, or the fund set up for dehumidifiers. Here's how a little engine works in the church community. And this could go on a little long today, but it's really cool stuff. Last week, Scott Dobb and I were talking at Heather and Skip's wedding reception about some of the flood things. And I was able to tell him what I saw when I was there in Tremont on Saturday. Scott, with his firefighting experience, both in Lebanon and as a volunteer here in Pine Grove, said they're going to need dehumidifiers in those homes to get the mold out. I wouldn't have thought of that. I've talked to everyone from the Salvation Army to all sorts of other people, but on my mind was, how do we deal with this mold? For some reason, I didn't think of dehumidifiers. Scott says dehumidifiers. Jason goes and mentions it in an email to a few pastors, and next thing I know, we're getting a fund in our association set up for buying dehumidifiers. And Warner's, by the way, is really, really helpful and supportive of that. Someone from this church has already donated enough to buy a dehumidifier. A church in Cressona has already committed enough, and we just need a few $100 more to get the ones that we've committed. They're already in homes working right now. We bought them. So we bought them. And we will get reimbursed for all of them. The funds are out there. But then on Thursday, on this conference call I missed, the same person who I think volunteered me for this committee said, oh, well, dehumidifiers. Jason says dehumidifiers. And like that, the United Way, who was also on the call, called Lowe's, and Lowe's sent 10 dehumidifiers to Tremont just to be used there. So that's a total of 16, maybe almost 20 dehumidifiers that will show up in Tremont to help with those homes. Some of them are actually here in Pine Grove as well. Because Scott Dobb said something to me at a wedding reception, and I decided to say something to someone else. This is why writing on those white papers down on the tables is so very important. We will read them. I don't know what will happen, but we will read them. And if your idea is really important to you, keep writing it on the paper. Keep telling someone from the consistory. Take charge of it. I'd love to see people step up and take charge of a ministry around here. I want to tell you a little bit more about some of these little engines. I mentioned the Methodists and Mennonites that I saw working in Tremont a few times. They too just kind of saw the need and decided to take a few days off and go on up there and load up the trucks. Now they have some experience in this, so they're doing that, and certain denominations are better at some things than others. The Methodists and the Mennonites are really good at building stuff or even tearing stuff apart. They just are. They have those groups in place, and us as a UCC has other skill sets. One of the things I've heard that made me so very proud of our denomination, I've heard it 3 times now actually since this event, is that the UCC will be the last ones to leave. That we will be there until the last person needs help, even if behind the scenes, making sure that they get that help. That is the one thing that we are good at. Others will rush in and do some initial work. We kind of show up and fill in the gaps and then stay until it's absolutely and completely done. Like the toys in the story, I've also seen scorn in the past few weeks over this same event. See, those other engines, they didn't just say no, they kind of belittled them and put them down and said, we're too good for this. I won't lie to you, a few times as our church was helping things or I was doing some things, I got a little bit of heat from some people. And I won't lie to you, a lot of it's rooted in that old Tremont versus Pine Grove thing that's hung around in some generations, and it's really kind of bothersome to me. I guess it's rooted in the days when the school systems merged and they didn't want to. But I could see in some people the look when Pine Grove was showing up to help. It wasn't nice to see. And I know too that Pine Grove people would have reciprocated the same look, at least some of that. But we live in a day and age where the mountains really aren't so big anymore to get over. We all communicate through social media and emails very quickly. It's nothing to drive 8 miles to go to church, and it's certainly nothing to drive 8 miles to help someone clean out their basement or their first floor. We're really one community if you look at it, and if you look at our school system. I can see other generations kind of getting over that and healing from that and doing a job of leading that. There's been some really amazing people up there to work with as well, and I hope they get a break soon. But the scorn will always be there. I was talking with a mentor of mine about this, and I was talking to him about this very story in The Little Engine That Could. He's got a lot of experience in disaster ministry. His parents were missionaries, actually, Baptist missionaries. I'm sorry, they were Brethren missionaries. So he is familiar with this, and he said, Jason, people are never more territorial than when a disaster happens. It's something he's never figured out, but in all the times he's traveled from Ghana to West Virginia to help after disasters, there are moments where people don't want the help from the outsider. But that doesn't stop you from helping. It didn't stop the Samaritan, who was not a person that would have normally been liked by this person laying alongside the road. It didn't stop the little engine who, in this day and age, I'm sure, though it's not included in the story, if this was a child helping someone out and really struggling, I'll bet there would have been people standing on the sidelines making fun of that child and betting on them to lose. But it doesn't stop the ones that really want to do it. It doesn't stop the true Samaritans, the best of us who want to help. So I've seen our church, not just because of the things I've been involved in, but the behind-the-scene things. From Scott saying stuff to me, to Sarah folding clothes up there, to Amy delivering buckets to someone, and all the other things I'm missing that people did in this church and in our community. Connections I made with other people. All of those white buckets over there all came from our friends at Summerhill. I didn't even know they were collecting them, and like that, 20 buckets showed up. And I want to warn the people that spend time around here, I've heard there's more buckets coming. I'm really not sure how to stop this right now, but we will find a place for them, and they will be put to use, and good will come for it. I think they're coming from Moritzburg now. I don't know, but there's buckets coming with stuff. And the sad thing is we will probably need them at some point or be able to give them to someone else. If I were to change the name of our church, just for a short time. Just for a short time, though some people know my thoughts on this. If I were to say, what best describes us right now as a church? Who are we? What are we doing now? I would write on the white paper on the tables downstairs, change our name to the Little Engine UCC. How cool would that be? Just for a little while, maybe, we get it changed at Harrisburg. The Little Engine UCC, I promise you we'll be the only one in the world with that. When you Google us, we will come up first, and people will know who we are. Maybe we even put a little blue sign out front. But I mean that with all sincerity, that we have some mountains, and you'll hear a little bit about that today, to climb and some valleys to go through. There's a part of us in our spirits that are really cruising right now, and it feels so good. I've never been a part of a church as good as this, and I will tell you that I never thought I would say that when I came here. I thought this would be a much harder battle to get to where we are. I really did. I loved this place, and I knew that God was calling me home. Well, I didn't. I did not know we would get this good this fast. And that's because of all of you. You're all a part of the Little Engine, stoking the fires and turning the wheels and asking for help and getting help. You don't leave the broke and dirty and naked stranger alongside the road. I've seen it. I know what you do. Even though your pastor might do it from time to time, though not always. You might see me driving around with a stranger in the passenger side riding shotgun sometimes. We have mountains and valleys to travel. But those children on the other side of the mountain, they need their good food and they need their toys. And I know we will get it to them. Amen. Please join me in our Apostles' Creed as it's printed in the front of our hymns. I believe in God the Father Almighty,